Hello, this is a very late debrief for our week 2 for our fall 2020 FCC course. I'm already starting off on a great foot, aren't I? There's a few pieces that I want to cover before I move on to the week 3 content. I've looked over all of our blog posts and our activities, so I want to go over a few pieces just so they're fresh in mind in case the importance of them might have been overlooked because we've all been pretty busy lately. So I'm going to jump right in here. If this will let me go ahead and move forward. Let's see if it'll let me. All right, the expectations is our first piece that I kind of wanted to look at today. We talked about this a bit last week too, but there's a few pieces that apply this week as well. First, let's make sure that always we're seeking to be as clear as possible in our instructions and our scoring. I wanted to point this out because I was purposefully vague in the instructions for the student interaction activity. I said give examples of activities. There were 3 boxes for each of those types of interaction, but examples didn't say 3. We only needed to take 2. So I wasn't very clear there, and everyone, for the most part everyone, there was a few who were very precise, but nearly everyone does 3 activities for each of the 3. So you thought up 9 activities when really only 6 were needed because I was purposefully not very clear. So the expectation clarity must be there, or you'll find students may grow frustrated if you weren't clear enough. And S for give me activities only implies plural. It doesn't require 3. So this kind of gray area is where students will seek to try to get as many possible points as they can. Now, because of this, and because we're kind of cruel to purposefully trip you up, we are quite lenient in grading. And if you've missed 1 out of those 3, you still got the other 2, so it was full credit. But be very careful with the instructions because it will affect scoring and students get excitable in that. If you can, provide a model. This is especially important with discussion boards, and I'll go over that a little bit more in a few moments. But whenever you can provide a model, students are able to see what quality looks like in these skills and concepts that you're trying to impart to them. And when they can see quality, they'll start striving for that. If they have to guess at what quality looks like, more often than not, they'll say, well, I guess it's good enough. And they're not trying to strive beyond that. They're just looking at good enough. So if you can provide a model, you're going to see increases in the students' attempts to reach higher on those criteria. Now let's look at the community building. This is probably one of the most challenging pieces of teaching online because we're used to building this community in face-to-face classrooms where we can see that spark of, oh, I get it, or grab onto a student's shoulder when you know that they're almost there and you're excited for them. But all of those physical interactions, that immediacy that we get from being in the same room is really changing, at least for the next several months minimum. So we have to find other ways to try to build that community when it's an online environment. You can do this by trying to connect with the students, but some students will close down for this. Those students that are seeking online courses because they have social anxieties or they're just not the type who likes to get that interaction as a part of their education, this isn't going to work to get them engaged in the class. But there are a lot of people who are the people-person types, and it will work well for them. If you can create a sense of belonging, constantly working to make your students feel like they are intended to be a piece of that group with everyone else, whether or not they're loud about it. They could be the quiet type, but they still belong. So in all of your language, seek to be as inclusive as you can. It's difficult to build this through anything other than your sincere attempts to show that you're caring for your students and that they belong, but it's not impossible. Comforting them. One of the things that I personally noticed over the last several months is that I wasn't really taking enough time to put a little bit of comfort in that other person. Try to let them feel a little easier about what's happening, because it's chaos for all of us. And when I started taking time to try to give a little bit more of a feeling of comfort for the person I was working with, I felt more connected, and I'm sure they did too, especially because moods rose immediately. So just add a little bit more in there. How you doing this week? Is everything okay? Just that alone can build those connections without pushing students to give up too much information if they're not comfortable. Valuing students fits with that belonging piece, but it can also be used to showcase when student comments may have been falling by the wayside, or if it's one tiny little piece of discussion board or blog, it can easily be overlooked. So taking a moment to stress that these 3 pieces, for example, were shared by Holly Lincoln. She pointed these out. And Jacqueline Bierks also pointed these out too. So we have wonderful pieces that are being shared from our students. Sometimes we get amazing insights from a student. Let's share those with the larger class, because it shows that we really value what's being said from our students. We're not just here to shove things into their heads. We want to have them share with us as well. And lastly here we have, and I'm closing this off a little bit, humility. Humility will let you be more human to your students. Humility is based on the same term. I say this because we've all experienced the know-it-all professor type who stands in the front of the room and bores us all senseless for 2 or 3 hours. And in no way, shape, or form did they feel approachable. It did not feel that they actually recognized that I was here to gain education, not be blessed with their presence. So I make it a point to try to tell folks that if I don't know the answer, I'm going to find it. And if I don't find it, I'm going to come back and tell you that. I'm going to share when I have my mistakes. If I'm wrong, I want students to point that out for me. I will happily admit it. I will happily fix mistakes. When I taught composition, I told students if they found a grammar or spelling error, I would give them a bonus point for each one. So it cleared up my professional appearance, and it also got students really hunting for the mistakes of their instructor. As long as you tell them that, yeah, I'm just human too, so I can make mistakes, they're more likely to feel that you are approachable and someone that they can connect with. So not only do we have these connection pieces that we can use to engage with students, the content can also be used as well. And this tends to be the way that a lot of folks try to engage and might not be quite as familiar with how to use these features. So things might stumble a little bit, but this is probably one of the best ways to get engagement, because you're not asking students to reveal something about themselves or potentially embarrassing someone. You're asking them to get more in depth with that content that you're sharing with them. So such things as, I do not want to move forward today. Make sure it's relevant. And this doesn't mean that if you're teaching something that doesn't seem to be very relevant, like maybe 16th century processes for printing, it's not very relevant to today. But if you ask them to compare it to how difficult would it be to do something like tweet in the 16th century, that in itself can get students to start relating the content to themselves, and it becomes more relevant. When do you think you'll use this on the job can reveal when students have no idea how relevant that content is, and it gives you an opportunity to explain that. So make sure that you can connect it to real-world topics or student concerns. Please be sure to distinguish between fact and opinion. This is an area where students struggle a lot. I would say adults struggle a lot with this as well. And when we can point this out, we help contextualize what is academic thought based on evidence and what is a theory or an opinion that we're working to try to support. When students can identify this in the content, they're going to be better able to support their own opinions related to that content. So be sure that you're pointing that out when you can. Study buddies. Melissa Stevens mentioned this, and I can't believe I haven't brought this up in previous sections of this course. If you start from day one and have students either self-select or at the end of the day one, you go ahead and match them up based as well as you can on where you think they might have some kind of synergies, but in some way get students to start connecting with each other. This allows them to grab content if they're missing a day and they leave you alone for it. Their study buddy can help bring them up to speed. If there is an important piece that you brought out in class and your study buddy and your student, those partners, one of the partners doesn't recognize that it was important or is not catching on just how important it is, the study buddy really can help out a lot with that. I've found that in classes that use study buddies, when they have a synchronous online course, like through Google Meet, they tend to text their responses quickly in the chat. If a study buddy has a question, they'll answer it. And so that you can continue on with your class, and the study buddy is actually kind of helping other people as well. So if you may consider having a partnership or setting up groups in a way from the get-go so that students can start engaging in the content in more of a partnership rather than just on their own. And the discussion boards here are one more way that you can really get students to engage with the content. I'm a huge proponent of study or discussion boards, but I know that a lot of people aren't quite sure how to use them. So I wanted to hit on a few quick tips and best practices based on another workshop session that I've done. So I'll hit a few of these, and if you want more, there is the Shaking Up the Discussion Board slideshow that is available to you. Just give me a holler if you'd like it. Give options whenever you can. If your week 4 discussion board can consist of 4 or 5 different forum topics, and students can just go in and pick which 2 they want to have a conversation within, they can do that. This also allows students to have the option to maybe do follow-up comments for one of those topics. They want to talk about it, but they're not comfortable starting off a thread. If you give them options like this, there are a lot of different ways that they'll start contributing that they may not have before. One of those options might be to do video posts. If you've ever done a voice thread, this is kind of similar to that, but it works very similarly. The only difference is it's not text-based anymore. A lot of students really prefer having this kind of an option since it becomes more like Snapchat and less like, oh, it's the discussion board this week. Start them off. Students don't know how to discuss things. They are very much a short, sweet, 120 character type conversations, and that's not going to work for academic discourse. So give them some prompts, some sentence starters to guide them to what a good discussion should look like. Split due dates. Make the first post due by Wednesday and the first follow-up by Friday. If you can split those due dates up, then what you're going to find is that students are going to have much more time to really think about these conversations in depth before they start making those last-minute responses. And grammar has a question mark here. I say this every time. If you want your discussions to reflect classroom discussions like you would have in a face-to-face environment, please consider if you're going to count for spelling, grammar, and mechanics. If it affects your ability to understand the discussion, then yeah, go ahead and count off for it. But if you're not counting off in-class discussions for poor grammar skills, consider whether you should really be counting them off in an online discussion. Rubrics will drastically reduce your grading time in discussion boards. This is often one of the areas where faculty say that they're bogged down, that they spend hours in discussion boards. When the grading part comes in, turn that over to a rubric. Have it be as objective as you can possibly make it, and you'll fly through the grading component, and you can spend your time talking about the content with your students instead of trying to get particular details about which posts were better than others. Remember why you want to give the assignments. Get the grading part out of the way as quickly as possible. Rubrics will get you there. But focus more on what you want to say in your discussions on the discussion board itself instead of in the grading. Try to have some of these be student-led. See if the topics are something that students are going to be more interested in. You may wish to assign 1 or 2 students per week to post a forum topic and go ahead and lead that thread. They post the follow-up questions. They ask the other students for their ideas. Those discussions can be very, very vibrant, and you can still get your content in if you're careful in how you create them. Give students an idea of an option, a selection, a smorgasbord of options to choose from regarding topics, regarding what concepts from the course they may wish to explore. Discussion boards can sometimes be pushed off toward the end of the semester and have them become really large-scale, almost research-based projects with other students coming in to offer their ideas or additional research they've found. The discussion board doesn't have to be, here is my prompt, you will answer X, Y, and Z aspects of it. You can say, you're going to have a discussion board forum, and this is where you're going to explore your research topic. You need to post what you're working on with it, some of your ideas, get feedback from students, but whatever that looks like at the end of this, I will come in 2-3 times over the course of the next month and give you some suggestions and move that forward. But it's totally up to you what that looks like. It just should contain at least 4 pieces of evidence for your project, at least 3 questions you pose to the class. Those kinds of pieces now have turned this from the traditional, I ask, you talk about what I want you to talk about, and to an exploration of ideas, which is kind of what we're wanting there. And make sure that you teach what quality looks like. We ask students to discuss things in an academically sound, intelligent manner using skills they probably haven't honed. So if you offer a little bit of push first, it's going to be a lot better. What's that look like? I offered a prompt to build discussion skills past the initial discussion prompt. So if I was teaching literature, I'd have my give your initial post. But then how do I interact after that? The initial post is really just an assignment like any other. I want the interaction. So to do that, I told students there were 2 parts they were required to do for each comment follow-up, and they had 2 to 4 comments depending on what it was. First, each post and response must be completely unique. This means you're not going to get that student who will copy-paste the exact same thing on all 15 threads. It has to be completely unique. Secondly, they also must respond with at least 2 from this list. Compliment the poster. That's almost always going to be one that they choose because it's easy, but it also builds a lot of positivity in your discussion board. They need to comment on that post in some way. So they found something that they wanted to say about it other than, hey, I agree. Connect to another poster topic or question the poster about their ideas. I used to call this the 3CQ. So that when I told students, remember to be unique and 3CQ, they knew what I was talking about. But it's also quick and easy to remember, so every time I go for a follow-up post on a discussion board, 3CQ and unique, I immediately know how to make that response. Make sure that whenever you're using video, nothing should be more than 10 minutes in length. That includes these kinds of videos that I'm making, but I'm speaking a little slower today, so mine tend to go long, so apologies. And this is a really long week too. Oh, and we're going to click a second time for everything. Yay! Control was one of those areas that we struggle with. We have curriculum that must be imparted to students. They can't run ramshot over our courses. There has to be some level of control, if only to keep them, our cats, wrangled in between the two lines that we need them to move through. But that's about the extent of where our control really should be if we want real student-initiated motivation. We should be able to say, this is the content you're going to learn by the end of this. But we get to explore how to get there together. That's the part where you're going to try to hand over as much as you can. And it works really well with some groups and classes and horribly with others. For example, I'm thinking of the biology A&P courses. You're not going to be able to allow students to do a whole lot of controlling of the type of content and how it gets rolled out and when they learn it. There's just too much. But you might be able to control, or might be able to have students control how often they're able to do the simulations, if those are a piece on there, or if those students prefer having some flashcard method of reviewing this, as opposed to like a quick quiz on Blackboard or Canvas. Those levels of control can still be in the student's hands. We just have to take a little time to build up enough to give them those kinds of options. So it's not just looking at how much of the content is controlled. It's how they encounter that content. You still have full control over how much. It's just if we have any way to be flexible with what ways they encounter that, that's really where we're looking at. I'm going to promote my rubrics one last time here. And I wanted to make a few statements on some quality pieces. When it comes to rubrics, if you can get these pieces in first, they're going to be much more successful for you. So first, focused on the performance, not the performer. This is the difference between saying that a post contained 5 sentences, all were directed up to the topic, and none strayed from that or went off topic. That's a very different way to describe a performance than saying that the student wasn't off topic. See the difference? If I say the student wasn't off topic, am I really focusing on the performance, that post, or am I saying I'm grading the student? If we can focus on the performance and those phrasings, then you have much, much less of a chance for having students say, hold on, what is that? What does that mean? And can I try to game this to get more questions or points? Next, make sure it's always observable. I cannot observe if the student doesn't know what they're talking about. I can observe what the text is, and I can observe that the text does not have correct information. That is how I'm proven that the student doesn't have an understanding. I can't say the student doesn't understand. I can say this paragraph does not have correct information that is on the topic. That's the difference here. It has to be observable. Precision in your words is important too. Don't be vague if at all possible. Stay away from don't, though, and tell us what it is. What does it look like when it is perfect and it's that 4-point top criterion performance? What does that look like? What does a 0.1 look like? Probably it's missing. What does 2 points look like? If there is a difference between 1 and 2 points, that is too vague, then you're probably sitting there and making the decision. All right, well, do I give her a point or do I not give her the point? That should be in your rubric clear as a bell. You should not be making these kinds of decisions. So look at your rubric if you're finding a lot of time spent there. And whenever you can, as Melissa said, promote balance. Every chance you possibly can. Promoting balance will ensure that your students are recognizing that that's an important aspect here too. So that's my last piece today. I want to apologize for going way over my time, but this will hopefully shorten things up for us next week. That one will be here much faster than this one, I promise. So now I get to go try to cobble these together because I'm on the wrong computer and went long. Until next week, give me a holler if you've got any questions, and I'll see you then.